Hey y'all, I'm here with Melissa Kupsch from Remedy Academy of Homeopathy. We are so stoked here at the Way Forward to be partnering with Melissa and Remedy in order to spread the message of homeopathy across the world and also to partner on the eventual development of healing centers across the United States.
People are pretty quickly coming to realize that frequency is the future of medicine. We are witnessing the great resurgence of homeopathy right now. We're really moving away from that suppressive medical model. Whether it's for eczema, asthma, hormones, fertility, anxiety, depression, trauma, whatever it is, it all starts as energy in the person's field first. If we change our field, we can completely change our life. Our 2-year academy is open worldwide to anyone who wants to become a homeopath. We've got 5 lecturers and we currently have over 500 students enrolled, which is record numbers in our field. A career in homeopathy is amazing for anyone who wants flexibility in their work and who wants to be valuable in creating this new world. We have stay-at-home parents enrolled, we have ex-medical professionals, grandparents signed up who want to learn how to heal their grandchildren and pass on that invaluable knowledge. We even have husband and wife teams. So my husband enrolled in the course with no prior knowledge of health as a background, and he is loving it.
Kylie is also enrolled as well, so my partner is, and she's so stoked to become a homeopath and to be helping to spread this message across the world.
The thing that we hear from so many of our students is, I found my thing. Homeopathy is the key. We harness frequencies from nature and we alter the field of all creations. So if anybody wants to join us or they want to know more about it, they can visit our website.
Yeah, and all that information will be in the show notes. So if you want to learn more about Remedy Academy, also Remedy Collective, also some of the homeopathic products that they have, please just head to the show notes. All of that will be listed there. Most healthcare today operates on an outdated mechanistic model, treating the body like a battlefield rather than a self-healing system. You wait months for an appointment only to receive a rushed diagnosis that labels you rather than truly understanding your unique health. Even in holistic health, many practitioners rely on endless lab tests and supplement protocols, addressing symptoms instead of the root cause. And the result? Another prescription or supplement regimen that merely suppresses or masks symptoms rather than facilitating true healing, whether the imbalance was physical, emotional, energetic, or a mix of all three. And that's why Dr. Tom Cowan co-founded the New Biology Clinic, to offer something radically different. As one of the most respected natural health doctors in the world, Dr. Cowan has spent decades challenging conventional medicine and advancing a deeper understanding of human biology, water, and natural health. His work isn't just about rejecting the mainstream, it's about offering a more truthful, biologically coherent approach for healing. The New Biology Clinic recognizes that health isn't about fighting disease, it's about restoring balance. You're not a diagnosis, you're an individual with a unique story, and healing should honor that. With virtual consultations available worldwide, the clinic offers a flat-rate monthly membership that gives you direct access to practitioners who take the time to actually listen. Members also get exclusive health live streams, a resource library, and live sessions covering everything from biofield tuning and breathwork to movement and meditation, all designed to support whole body healing. And if you're not ready for a membership, you can book a one-time appointment, sign up for an enrichment-only membership for the healing modalities alone, or schedule a free connection session with one of the care team members to see how the New Biology Clinic can help in your specific situation. This isn't about keeping you dependent on doctors. It's about making you sovereign over your health. Head to newbiologyclinic.com and use code THEWAYFORWARD, and that's spelled The Way, F-O-R-W-A-R-D, for $50 off account activation, or just head to the show notes for more info. If you're a member of The Way Forward, email hello@thewayforward.com for $150 off. Your body already knows how to heal, and New Biology Clinic helps you remember. There's a recent poll that I put out on all my social media channels, and 95% of people responded that they're struggling to find their health and freedom community in person. And don't get me wrong, these platforms, these devices that you're listening to or watching this podcast on right now are great for helping to disseminate information, helping us, find like-minded people to validate us, but they are not a replacement for real in-person community. At the core of our new community platform is a powerful, easy-to-use map helping you to instantly connect with like-hearted, like-minded community, including men and women, farms, schools, practitioners of all types, and other businesses near you. The platform also includes groups, social functions, messaging, and Platinum members also get access to our content library with footage from all of our in-person and virtual events like Confluence and the end of COVID, as well as breathwork sessions, Qigong sessions, member Q&As, and also member community calls. So if you'd like to support this podcast and support our mission of helping people to connect hyper-locally in person, and also obviously support yourself in the process, go to the show notes or just go to thewayforward.com/join. And again, the way forward is spelled thewayfwrd.com/join to become a member today. Help us build the way forward for mankind. I am honored to be leading this panel discussion, facilitating this panel discussion with some, I got to say, just absolute badasses in the spaces of intuitive abilities, blindfold vision, mindsight, as it's also called, and just overall what you could call, I guess, psychic abilities that I have come to believe, and I'd say a lot of the people on this call would agree with me, if not everyone, are innate to our children, innate to all of us, but are laying sort of dormant and unlocked. And I'm going to do my best to remember in this introduction everyone's titles and everyone's organizations that they're working as a part of. So we have Dr. Maria Oliva, who's also been on the way forward a number of times, who runs the University of Terrain. And correct me if I'm wrong on this, Anna, that has just received accreditation as an actual university in Mexico.
That's it.
Okay, awesome. And then Nick Egan, who I was just introduced to, and he is a coach for business executives and leaders. And I'll have info about each of the participants in the show notes that's relevant, but also relevant to this call, Nick's oldest daughter or son, correct me if I'm
My middle daughter.
Your middle daughter has gone through Dr. Edith's Luminous Children Blindfold program. And Paul and Jeannie, they're Canadian. I was joking with them before that. I'm just going to introduce them as Canadians, but just poking fun. But they're community builders in Canada that are cultivating like-minded community. And their daughter also went through Dr. Edith's program. And we have Dahlia, who I've seen a number of incredible videos of at this point, who has cultivated her own approach to unlocking these intuitive abilities in children, and also, correct me if I'm wrong, Dahlia, in adults as well.
Adults and especially blind adults.
And especially blind adults, which is absolutely incredible. And then John Chavez, who runs a 501c3 organization called DMT Quest, which is essentially on the forefront of looking into and really cultivating human potential, just looking into any research, also conducting your own research, correct me if I'm wrong on that, John, regarding human potential and some of these abilities that we'll be talking about today on this call. And then, of course, my friend who needs no introduction for this podcast, because I mention her like every other episode, my friend and mentor, Dr. Edith Ubuntu Chan, who also has a 501c3 coming out later in the year, and that will be the Luminous Human Institute. So the purpose of this panel is just to gather some people coming at multiple angles, discussing psychic phenomena, intuitive abilities. I prefer to call them intuitive abilities. I think that it's an intuitive capacity in all kids, but a colloquial term that most people use is psychic abilities. So I have to say that as well. But discussing this from the lens of Mindsight, and I'm sure we'll get into some other things. And it's cool because we have a few parents whose children who have gone through this, and also Dr. Anna, whose kids learned it via a completely different method with a completely different set of masks. And then Dahlia, who is teaching it to people who are blind, but also cultivating her own method to do this. And then, of course, John Chavez, who's on the leading on the cutting edge for research regarding these topics. So I think it's best to just make this an open conversation. So we've had some interesting conversations in the chats as people are learning about these abilities, whether they've gone through it themselves, whether they've had kids go through these abilities, or they're just hearing about it, because I think this current time in the world right now, people are ready to hear this message. People are ready to explore this message deeply. And it doesn't seem like something that is abstract, something that is so far off, something that, may be rumor, something that may be completely myth. It's something that people are actively exploring and cultivating. And with that comes, some interesting conversations regarding the validity of this. There's some interesting questions that have been asked by people. So I just wanted to open it up to the floor, really to anyone, to discuss your own direct experience with this phenomenon, specifically speaking to Mindsight or blindfold vision, but also any other intuitive phenomena.
Well, I can go ahead and start and say a lot of the questions about mindsight and intuitive vision, extraocular vision, a lot of the question comes around to, are they somehow peaking with a mask? And I want to say that you really don't even need to start mindsight with a mask at all. When I work with blind people, there is no mask. And so you actually see these people going through the same process as people with masks. And they're opening in very similar ways. The only difference is you have to kind of explain what they're seeing. But we have seen, and I've worked with blind people, blind from birth, no sense of light their entire life, some of them with no eyes at all, being able to read within a week. Of course, I'm having to kind of gradually show them what letters look like and what shapes look like. But these are people not wearing a mask that are able to do it. And they're activating this similar ability, this same ability. And just for fun, afterwards, I like to give them a mask just to show them, hey, you're still not using your eyes. Because even the blind people will start thinking, oh, I must be using my eyes. You did something to my eyes. I'm like, we're not using your eyes. And so here's a mask, put it on. And they are seeing better with the mask. Because I had one blind person tell me, hey, it actually creates more contrast to have a mask on. And so I actually see better with it. And so, so to me, there's not even a question about whether it's happening. It's more like, how is it happening? That's where the focus really needs to be. With me, I never had a question about it because when I first opened, I opened in the weirdest way, and I used several different masks. I didn't use just one. I used any mask.
And
but
Dahlia, real quick, when you say open, will you describe what you mean by that too, for
thank you.
people
Yeah.
who may be coming across this for the first time?
So that means I was able to finally see colors and find details and be able to see pictures and read and it looks very similar to when you're using your eyes. So I can see it just as clear as if I were using my eyes. But the first time I started to open for the first time, when I started to see color for the first time, I had been working on that for 6 months. I had been walking around in the dark. And when I say the dark, I mean, I had a blindfold on and it was pitch black for 6 months. I could not figure it out. But I was seeing outlines and I love those outlines. I was able to get around. I was able to see everything except for I couldn't see colors. I couldn't read. I couldn't make out like pictures or fine details. And so finally, when I finally did open, it was just a little splash of color. I could finally see it. It was after 6 months of total blackness, and it was in the back of my head. But I had to hold the object in front of me to see it. So even if I put the color back here, it would disappear. And so to me, there was never a doubt. Am I cheating? And there was never anything like that because of the way I opened. I was blessed to have opened that way. Some people, they will open in the front. And so they will start to rationalize and question, hey, am I somehow peaking or something? How is this possible? And so that is when that happens, it's really good to have like a good framing for that person and to really encourage them and to show them what's going on and to show them people that are doing it at a much higher level. And just how do I say this? When they're at that beginning stage, it is so important to just encourage them because they could easily lose it really, really quickly because so much of this is mental. And I was telling Dr. Edith or I don't remember who I was telling actually, but I said, the whole thing with skepticism is, when you go to a person that's just beginning to play basketball and they're very much in the beginning stages and they're just learning to dribble or something, it's someone coming around saying, prove that what you're doing is real. It's saying to a basketball player that's just starting out, saying, if you don't do a 3-point line right now, that means you're not really playing basketball. It means you're cheating. And it's like telling someone when they're really starting, you need to prove it now. When they're just at the beginning stages, it's just going to discourage. It's going to make it so they can't even get to that place. So with me, with people that are just kind of starting out, like let them just start out and progress. And that's where the focus for me is. And that's what I really, really want to focus on, is just helping people progress. And once people progress to a certain stage, yeah, like as much as you want, go ahead and if they're into it, let them go ahead and prove it. I always prove it after a certain level with them. I say, you can prove it to yourself all you want. Let's just progress right now. But anyway, that's my take on that right now.
I love that basketball analogy. The analogy that we often use is a different sport, which is swimming. Because there's a subtle nuance here, because it's like, imagine though that you live in a world where most people say that human beings are land animals, that we can't swim. And then you get a few people saying, hey, actually, you can swim. And swimming is quite fun. Come and play and explore with us. So you got some kids that are just like blowing bubbles, learning to float on their back and just like doggy paddling on the shallow end. And it's a similar thing with the 3-pointer, right? It's like, no, everybody must be swimming 100-meter dash at high speed. Only butterfly stroke for us to believe that this is possible. And at the same time, I know that we do have some humans that are able to swim the butterfly stroke, right? But there's a whole chunk of the population that doesn't even believe that swimming is possible yet. So I understand it's a conundrum. There's a population of us that have had the direct experience of swimming freestyle, swimming backstroke, swimming breaststroke. And some of us are like, yeah, let's try butterfly stroke. Let's try it out and see how it goes. And then you've got also some of the beginners that are just blowing bubbles and floating on their back, and is quite unkind to subject all of the beginners to say like, oh, you're just beginning your journey here. Let's prove that you can swim butterfly stroke. And it's kind of like contextually inappropriate. But at the same time, we are contending with the fact that most of the world doesn't even believe that swimming is possible. So how do we navigate this? So there's many different levels of conversation that could be possible depending on who we're talking to. So I would pose that question to Alec. Who is our audience? Are we speaking to skeptics that don't believe in the possibility? Are we speaking to people that do know in their heart, in their soul, in their bones that these possibilities are real and accessible, and they just want to go into the direct experiencing of it? Who are we talking to? Because how we articulate this conversation could be quite different depending on the audience.
That's a lot of pressure. And I would say that I'd like to try to address both as best we can. I like to sort of do that in all my conversations, as you know. So kind of addressing both as best we can.
Yeah. Okay. Let's do our best to navigate all the levels. And it might be helpful for us as we go into this conversation to say, well, for the skeptical minded person, this is something to consider. And for those that already know in their heart and soul that these possibilities are real, these are some recommendations for how to enter into a deeper, more confident, direct experiencing of these possibilities. Yeah, I think that would.
What I love about that, just real quick, Dr. Edith, is you're talking about how it really requires your own direct experience for a lot of people, especially for the person who, let's say, is very, very, very skeptical, but at least a little bit open-minded, right? Not having that direct experience can really put you in a position where you almost become closed-minded and skeptical. So I'll just speak real quick contextually to my own direct experience with this. And I was first exposed to this when I saw Dr. Anna's kids, Matthias and Ruben, do this at Anarchapulco in February of 2024. So you might have heard on this podcast me say some unnamed Spanish kids that live in Mexico. And it's because I was keeping with Dr. Anna's wishes not to reveal their identity. But I think at this point, the cat's out of the bag. So it's all good. I'll never forget. I will never forget this for the rest of my life. Seeing Matthias and Ruben do vision-based exercises as if there was nothing on their face covering their ability to see. And when I mean that is they're playing catch as if there is no mask there. They're reading as if there is no mask there. They're seeing at all angles as if there is no mask there. And even to the degree that I held my phone up, pulled up a random paragraph on my phone, put a piece of paper, I've shared this a number of times on my show now, put a piece of paper over my phone, and Matthias had the mask on, right? So double layers. And he was able to read every word on my phone. Like, that's my own direct experience with it, that I can say with near 100% certainty that there's no possible way that he's peaking. So the conversation for me again becomes, well, how do we explain how this works? And I have some ideas related to the biofield and ether and things like this. And Dr. Anna, I know you share a lot of those same sentiments. Maybe some of you here do as well. But I also understand why someone who has not had that direct experience might assume that this is all, just totally made up and people are peaking. And with that being said, I do want to say one more thing, that I think it goes without saying that if you wear a mask, period, no matter what type of mask, any specific way, you might be able to peek through the mask, of course. But also, Dr. Edith, you and Bodan are pretty consistent in saying that the way these masks work, we want a little bit of light filtering through. And I don't want to steal your words or say this incorrectly, but from my understanding, it's because having a little bit of light filter through sort of stimulates the brain to think that it is using vision when it is in fact not using vision. And if I'm incorrect on that, please correct me.
Okay, I'm happy to explain that piece, if that's okay with the panel, that I can go into this. So our experience working with children, and it was further, I deepened my understanding by training with Dahlia, and Dahlia and I are collaborating on adult training programs, and I'm just so grateful for her presence in my life, because her work with adults and with blind people really refines the subtle nuances, the little stages of progression that's so helpful for me to deepen my understanding. Because with kids, they just open so fast. You're like, what just happened? Suddenly they're seeing 360 degrees, and you don't have that slower progression like with adults to really deepen the nuances of the stages of progression that's necessary. And then for me to explore with my own Mindsight, and then more recently training with Dahlia, a lot of little milestones along the way got filled in that really deepened my understanding. And I'm also developing some new methodologies, exploring it with my child right now. And this is going to turn into a new set of programs that we offer to our luminous children in our community too. So lots more to unpack, but let's backtrack for a second. So let's assume a human being has their physical, say, 5 senses. And then we also have these other additional senses that are alive and possible in all human beings. However, they haven't been exercised consistently. So they've atrophied and they've laid dormant. When you put on your blindfold and you block some of this visual sensing, then your body and your brain and your being goes into, well, okay, my dominant sense of physical sight is covered. All the other things could potentially be amplified. And I just came back from my 11-day darkroom retreat where we spent 9 days and 9 nights in complete darkness. So I'm speaking also from direct experience. This is my second 11-day darkroom retreat, where if the physical sight is not dominant, your sense of smell, hearing, taste, touch, temperature, all these other things get really heightened. And this intuitive visual sense can also get heightened too. It's interesting. In darkrooms, sometimes things would get so bright, and the visual glow of all of the furniture in the darkroom, I could see the shape of all of the furniture in the darkroom, but they would glow like 6 to 9 inches out, and I fell on my butt a few times because I misjudged the actual size of the furniture. I would sit on my butt and I slide off the edge of the chair or the bed because I misjudged by a few inches, But I would put on the blindfold, take it off, put it on, take it off, and the visual was exactly the same, just like Dahlia described with blind people. In fact, sometimes if I put on the blindfold, I think because I've train myself to kick in more intuitive sensing with the feeling of having a blindfold on my face, things would get even clearer. So I had that direct experience during darkroom. But let's say we're not in darkroom and we just put this blindfold on. Your being is going to kick into, okay, how am I going to perceive now? So you have the opportunity to train your intuitive hearing capacity, your intuitive smelling capacity, your intuitive sensing and feeling capacity, intuitive tasting capacity. All these other intuitive senses could potentially get amplified. So it's up to us now. What exercises do we guide a student through to specifically focus on each of these senses until they all wake up and then we become the new human that has all these other additional senses alive, awakened, the muscles have been exercised so that we can have more expanded capacities of what it is to be a human. So within the context of our kids class, it's a 6-week program where we spend the first week and the 6 weeks mostly focus on working with the parents and the core 4 weeks with the children. So it's a very short duration of time. And we choose to focus on the visual sensing, right? So I know that Dahlia trains people with intuitive smell, and to kickstart some of that olfactory function, she might use a little bit of essential oils to get the smell function going, to focus on training that sense. So it's the same idea. You can completely black out and tighten the mask all the way. And in the first class, we recommend that our parents actually loosen it just a tiny bit with the understanding that we're not, you paid good money to take a class. You're not going to cheat and look through the crack. But the idea is that we do want a tiny bit of light somewhere leaking in because that cues your brain to focus on light sensing.
Hi, my name's Kabreem. I'm 10 years old and I'm doing my blindfold vision practice. Recently, I've heard that some kids and adults are worried about peeking through the nose bridge crack right here. So I want to tell you to please not worry because when your blindfold vision windows are stable, it's obvious that it's different from the little light that comes through the nose crack. It can look like circles here or here, maybe here even. It's different for everyone, but it's really obvious that's different from the little crack of light that could come in through the nose crack. Also, that little light that peeks in through the crack could help your real blindfold vision get stronger. Once your blindfold vision gets strong and stable, you can challenge yourself by taping over the nose bridge like this or like this. So I'm going to show you my blindfold vision practice with this mask that has the black duct tape.
Are you ready? Yeah. Let's shuffle it a little bit. Okay, what color is this?
Blue.
Nice. This one?
Green.
Nice. And this one?
Blue.
This one?
Red.
Nice. This one?
Yellow.
Nice. This one?
Pink. Red.
Red. Good.
Okay. Now, for an extra challenge, I'm going to switch to this mask with the extended duct tape.
So people can see the difference and see it side by side. Okay, go ahead and switch to the extended duct tape mask. This color.
Red.
Nice. This color.
Blue.
Nice. This one.
Green.
Nice. This one.
Blue.
Nice. This one.
Orange. No, red.
Red. This one.
Green. No, yellow.
Nice. This one.
Pink.
Nice.
To make it even more advanced, I started practicing with the shield. Hi, my name's Shield, and I'm practicing blindfold vision with Kabreem.
What color is this one?
Yellow?
Yes, it is yellow. What color is this one?
Green?
It is green. Nice. What about this one?
Orange?
It is orange. Next one.
Pink?
It is pink. Nice.
Blue?
Nice. Yes. It is blue. It is blue. Good job.
Like orange or yellow?
Wow. How did you know
actually.
that? Wow. Okay.
Peach, but I'm gonna say pink?
Yes. Oh my goodness. I'm so excited for you.
Green. Okay. Orange?
Yeah.
Okay, well. Yellow? Just try
Goodness.
to
Okay, this one.
last one.
Mm-hmm.
Red?
Yay! Wow. And as these windows of perception start to emerge, the kids tell us that it becomes obvious. Well, some kids have the light glowing from the crack, and there is some doubt or worries that they might be peeking. But for the most part, kids see these circles or ovals or these different shapes that are very distinctly different from peeking through the crack. And once these windows get stabilized, especially if the kids are perceiving behind their head, to the side of their head, or down the hall, there is no more doubt. But in the beginning, if some of the students are seeing light emerging through the nose bridge, it's reasonable that there could be doubt, like, oh, did something happen where I'm peeking now? What's going on? So it's very reasonable that this is a kind of like concern that needs to be addressed. For the most part, kids tell us they see these distinctly different shapes, ovals or circles, that look very different. And once these windows of perception get really confident, really strong, really stable, then we tighten the mask, block off all the light. And what the kids experience is as if there are eyeballs, like light sensors on your cheek, on your temples, on your forehead, light sensors on the back of your head. It's as if eyeballs have grown on your head. And we think it might be a type of trained synesthesia, where your body and your brain converts that visual light information that is exposed to your skin, and it converts it into mapping an image in your brain. That's our working hypothesis right now. Obviously, these are the interesting questions that require some research. And what gives me comfort that this kind of induced synesthesia is possible is I discovered Dr. Norman Deutsch. Do you guys know Dr. Norman Deutsch? He wrote a book that called, can you guys look up what it's called? The Brain That Changes Itself, is something like that. Is that what it's called? Yes. So in it, he popularized this device that was developed by a whole different doctor, a doctor from Mexico who's passed on now. He developed this sensory substitution device that essentially takes a camera image of whatever you're looking at. So the subject, who is a blind individual or visually impaired individual, wears a camera, say, on their forehead. And this camera takes a black and white image of whatever you're looking at and converts it into electrical signal that taps on your tongue. And so this signal is registered by the subject's brain and converts into a visual image in the brain. And we've got cases of people that have climbed mountains, that can play sports, that can just move through life completely normally. Once they train to this, they can convert the electrical tapping signal on their tongue into a totally usable visual image so that they can do sports and all the activities of daily living, because it's like a trained kind of synesthesia. So we think that this Mindsight is a similar thing, where we convert visual information that's exposed to our head and our skin into a visual image in our brain. And that might be how this Mindsight actually works.
Yeah, I like that, Dr. Edith, because induced synesthesia is basically what we're doing. So when I do it, I do work on all the other senses. If it's a sighted person, they have a blindfold on, and I'm working on all the other senses and allowing them to see that you can use all these senses to tell what these colors are, and we can program it so that you start seeing it in mind's eye. So that's the first step. And I'm purposely working with senses they're familiar with first. And then we go into these senses they're not so familiar with, like just by sensing the energy or something. And then they do get really good at it. So by the time, and this is kind of how I introduce the light, by the time they get to the part where we're going to introduce light, they welcome it because they've seen this whole time their mask was pitch black. And now it goes to, is there light on or are we in darkness? So I like to take blind people, no mask. I take them into a dark room. And so up until then, we are doing all of this trained in a synesthesia. So they're able to tell everything apart with all these other senses. And we're starting to introduce it into mind's eye. But now I want them to actually see in a visual way. And so I say, now we're going to play with your sense of light. And so up until, if I would have introduced the light in the beginning to a blind person, they would be like, no way, I can see light, but once they've practiced all of these other senses, they're like, well, I've been, I thought I couldn't do all these other senses. I thought I couldn't tell something by smell. I thought I couldn't tell something by energy, but I know I can now. So if she says I can see with light, I know I can. And so it just takes them a few minutes for that light sense to happen. And they start to see the light and they welcome it. And it's the same with the blindfold. You can just introduce once, because light is what activates the visual part. And this is how I explain to blind people. I say, we use light to see in a visual way. So if you're going to want to see in a visual way, we're going to have you get used to your light sense. And you don't need eyes for it. Just reminding you don't need eyes. But yeah, when you're using a blindfold, it's the same thing. We're going to introduce light now and welcome the light. And so yes, like what Dr. Edith says, you can loosen it to welcome more light, but usually by then you'll start seeing light anyway, because it's more of an internal light that's happening. But yeah, so I always encourage, yes, welcome the light. That's what you want. And watch, that light is going to get bigger. And that's the whole goal, is to make it so big that you can just see the entire room. You can see fine detail. And so it's all about welcoming that. But that is a different sense entirely that we're using in order to be able to see it. So, but some people, if you start them too quickly, with the blindfold, you introduce light immediately, because it's so similar to using your eyes. They're going to think, I must be peeking or something, So that's why with adults, with children, it's like instant. They just, you're an authority figure. They trust you, and they don't question when you say they can do something. So they allow it to happen. With adults, you usually have to go through a progression for them to actually accept it. But yeah, if we adults can do it, it's incredible. We can do so much more than what we realize. And if we just focus on that progression, we get more people doing this. Oh, it's going to be so incredible what we're going to be able to show, even in a year.
I'd like to just respectfully push back on the synesthesia hypothesis. I mean, it makes sense. So synesthesia is just the idea that you're experiencing different sense data through some kind of alternative, right? And then your mind is creating some understanding of that sense data. But if that were the case, so my daughter, she's 11, she can fairly regularly go down the hall and I can hold up a number, a card, or a color, and she'll identify what that is with a high degree of accuracy, plus 80%. If it were only synesthesia, you wouldn't necessarily, there would be no sense data to be able to record to that, right? So it's not like her there's no skin, there's no other kind of olfactory device. There's nothing really at all. So what I would suggest would be, I believe that there's some kind of direct conscious understanding of that. Some of my background comes from in Buddhist philosophy. We talk about the sixth level of consciousness, which is basically mind. And it's the same thing when you're having a dream and you see an object, and it's just because it's direct sensing of the mind itself. And so I think that there's a different mechanism, not synesthesia. And I think what's happening is, at least in modern psychology, the idea that the mind can directly perceive something is not very clear at all, right? That's a pretty controversial statement from a psychological perspective. But from a more traditional perspective, I think that's what's happening.
I wonder if it's both, though. I wonder if it's possibly both.
Yes.
Because
I was going to say,
there could become some level of perceiving that is closer to the body that induces synesthesia. Yeah. But then there also, even if it is close to the body, could be some element of feeling, for lack of a better term, with the biofield through the ether and instantly perceiving information.
Yeah, that's
It could be a mix of
Yeah,
both of those
so-
things.
with it too. There's like layers and levels of progression, and we're in this conversation. We're kind of unpacking some of the layers and levels and the different dimensions of sensing to say that ultimately, holistically, all of these layers and levels are possible.
Yeah.
And when we unpack and slow it down to the different stages and progression, there are some stages that are interesting to kind of like focus on one at a time until it expands into this much more expansive state that your daughter very naturally locked into. It was really,
and I mean, it's a good point. She did, the very first instance was about her feeling. So it would be like her putting her hand and saying like, oh, there's orange. Like that was the simplest thing, not so much a visual representation. So it is a good point.
It was through feeling orange.
She was feeling orange. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So I appreciate you mentioning that, Nick, because there are different stages, and it gets to a point where it's definitely way beyond synesthesia. When I start, like I usually start people by just touching just colors. It's just simple, something they believe they can do. They're just touching it, and they get really good to the point where they can't get it wrong. That's what I always say. You do it until you can't get it wrong. But at the same time, I'm subtly training them so that as soon as they touch it, their mind is showing it. So once they actually know what the colors are, once they know it for sure and they're really good, I'll always say, now I just want you to hold on to that color in your mind's eye just for a few seconds, and just for about 3 seconds. I do that a lot. You do it about 50 to 100 times. Every time they even touch the color, even before they see it in their mind, they already know what it is. But as soon as they touch it, mind's eye will show them. And then you do with these other senses, and then you get to a point where you do it at a distance. And so I've gotten to the point where I can hold a color in another room and they'll immediately see it. So then it's like, is that synesthesia? It wouldn't be. But in the beginning, I kind of like played it out like that. I kind of trained it in a way that's similar. But yeah, it does get to a point where it's just unexplainable with our current scientific background and jargon and everything.
I'm super curious to hear from Dr. Anna, but if I may just kind of summarize what's been said so far, what we're talking about is that we're breaking these abilities into individual components, but ultimately, I know Alec on the show is always talking about entering into a higher level of coherence. So it's like we can dissect it into these sub steps, and then they integrate, and we expand. And so all of mankind right now is exploring things that is like, oh, okay, when we dissect this, it at some point you outgrow that stage of your development and evolution, and you just keep entering into a higher and higher and higher level of coherence and more expansive state. And so this conversation is really just breaking it down into sub-step, but ultimately it all integrates back together into one whole experience of an expansive human being.
Yeah, so there are many things I would love to share. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that in an order way. But yeah, my kids, I learned to do this training with Noé Esperón, that he's from Mexico. I learned that when I was still living in Spain, and I trained my kids. I've been doing that for many years. And during that time, we have had different processes too. You know, it came a moment that they told me, Mom, I'm cheating. I say, why do you say that? It was because someone told them that that is impossible. But I still remember Ruben, the first time that he could see. And we, after doing the exercises, and he and I been playing Uno, the Uno cards with the blindfold, he with the blindfold, we were out in the garden, and he was saying, Mom, so what is impossible? Can I fly? So for me, the important thing is not so much that the kids can see blindfolded or not. The important thing is all the changes that they have inside themselves and that I've been observing for years, to the point that I confess you that when they have a bad day or they are in a horrible tantrum, now they don't have tantrums, they are 13, but sometimes, you know, the hormones are a little bit tough. So I just put them the blindfolds, and immediately there is something inside them that goes, shoo. And I tell you, we don't use the regular blindfolds, the mindful blindfolds that Dr. Edith is using. We started with 3 blindfolds, 1, 2, and 3, bigger and bigger. This is how the training works. And even with that, some people were telling me that's not possible. So what I did was this. I got goggles from swimming, and I just put them. Well, now you see the reflection of the window, but it's absolutely painted with black paint. And with this, I tell you, no single anything goes in. So every time that someone comes and say, they are cheating because there is a thing there, I say, okay, let's do. And they put this, and on top of this, they put the other one, and on top of the other one, they put the blindfold. I say, yeah, now, do you realize that they are not cheating? And please don't do that in front of them, because that creates a big impact of them. Thank God they are older now, and, we don't know what is going to happen, but we're keeping it alive as much as we can. Basically, because the changes I observe on them, the inner changes that make them much more intuitive in general, much more even responsible. I love how they behave when we do these trainings. And there is a big, big difference before and after, even when they've been more than 5 years doing it. There is a big difference. Another thing I want to say is that in science, and now I've been talking as a mom or as an observer of this phenomenon that the kids can do. Another thing is, as a scientist, many times we have a problem, is that we deny what we cannot explain. And in science, for something to be real means that I can repeat that I have consistent results, and I can compare that with a control. In science, you don't need to know the mechanism to say this is real. And this is something that most of the people don't understand. There are many things in science, starting with the aspirin, the electricity, and even the electrocardiogram. And I have fermentation, anesthesia, the placebo, the gravity. All these things, we've been using them scientifically. We've done inventions about them when we didn't even know how they were working. Anesthesia has been used before even knowing what were the mechanisms that can explain why that works. So this is something that for me is very, very important, that we cannot explain the mechanism, doesn't invalidate the fact itself. For those people that they say, but how can you explain that? No, I cannot. But that doesn't mean that it's not real. The fact that I cannot explain you yet the mechanism. Why? Because neuroscience is absolutely brain-centered and materialistic. And while neuroscience is only trying to find the neurotransmitters or the physical thing that they can measure, is never going to understand what is a human being, because we are not just matter. And we know that even from physics, we know we are information, energy, and matter. So unless we go one step beyond the matter to start understanding what is the mind, and what's the difference between the mind and the brain, and what is the memory, and how the brain is working, we will always be lost. And there is so many experiments that they tell us, no, what we know about neuroscience, in part, yes, can be true, but there are many things that are not true, because we know all these cases of people that they don't have a brain. They have just 5% of the brain, or they have destroyed because of an accident 70% of the brain, and they having a normal life. They just have liquids in their brains. They don't have empty space. They have liquid, the cerebrospinal fluid. So we need to start putting many pieces, again, that I don't understand the mechanism, doesn't invalidate the result itself. It's just that we still don't know that. And neuroscience or these kind of experiments, we need to do them, yes, with EEGs and with any kind of things that we can have physical, but also we need to start thinking a little bit out of the cage, out of the box, because otherwise we will never understand what is really happening. And what I cannot deny are the changes that I observe in all the kids that do that, in terms of strengthening their willpower, making them much more intuitive, distinguishing so quick when someone is lying. This is so awesome. The way they can distinguish when something is true or is not true. It's amazing. And to the point that I trust them so much that sometimes when we need to make decisions, I just send them and say, go there and explore and tell me, no, Mom, you don't want to be there. No, Mom, I remember when we were going to rent a house and we arrived, there was a beautiful house with some beautiful garden, and the kids didn't even want to enter. I say, Mom, don't you feel it? Don't you perceive it? Don't you see it? And they say, what? This is not the place for us. I say, okay, I trust you. That's it. So for me, those are important things.
There's so many things that I want to pull on there that you said. I want to summarize what you said, though, with respect to an observed phenomenon. There's a difference between witnessing an observed phenomenon and not knowing the causal mechanism of that observed phenomenon versus outright denying that the observed phenomenon even happened. Those are two completely different things. We have an observed phenomenon. I would say observed phenomena because there's so many different takes on how this actually occurs, but we don't know for sure. We're all speculating what the causal mechanism is behind this, and that's what we're trying to figure out right now. Just like the basketball analogy and the swimming analogy, we're trying to figure out how exactly does it work. But you bring up a really good point, Anna, regarding open-minded skepticism and closed-minded skepticism. And if I may, could I share what happened at Confluence just before the blindfold vision demonstration? So just before we were doing a demonstration where 7 of the children who have been activated with this ability, 2 being Dr. Anna's children, 2 being Dr. Edith's children, and then a couple or 3 others who have gone through Dr. Edith's program, were displaying this ability to the audience, to roughly 750 people that were there. And just before, Dr. Anna comes rushing up to me on stage and says, Alec, we have a major, major, major problem. Matthias is struggling to do the abilities right now because one of the men up by the house that they were staying at on the property was poking fun at the ability, saying, no, there's no way you're doing this. There's no way it's real. And he was probably just joking, but it came across in a way to Matthias where Matthias really took on that belief that, oh, I can't do this. And he was legitimately struggling at that point to do the abilities. And we're talking a kid, this is the kid who I had a phone in my hand and had a piece of paper and he had the blindfold on. And then as Dr. Anna's saying, has goggles that are blackout, plus a mask on, plus another mask on, and is still able to see. But that's just how powerful it is to have those conditioned beliefs reinserted back into you and what it can do. It can really be detrimental. And I know, Dr. Edith, you always talk about, my son has gone through your program, and I love that you say, hey, we need to be very careful about who we share these abilities with, who we display this in front of. If you have open-minded but skeptical family members, that's totally okay. If you have closed-minded skeptical family members, not someone you want to be around. But even then, when it comes to, quote, open-minded skepticism, that can be taken in a variety of different ways, where if you're someone who claims to be open-minded, but then is outright denying that this is possible, referring to people as delusional, saying it's all peaking, that's teetering on becoming completely closed-minded and skeptical, in my opinion. And that's where we just have to be very careful with this when it comes to our kids who are activating this and these abilities. But it also speaks to a larger thing that also applies to us as adults, in my opinion. Like, we're all about dissolving the conditioned, fear-based, limiting beliefs. That's what I try to do with my various podcast episodes. And what happens when we readopt those conditioned, fear-based, limiting beliefs? What does that do to our physiology? What does that do to our ability to navigate this realm in a very easeful, graceful, loving way? Those are questions that I tend to ask myself after witnessing this happen. But what was really incredible too, and this speaks to being in community, whether virtually or in person, with people who get it, for lack of a better term, in air quotes. The moment Matthias sat down with those other kids to start the demonstration, it was good. He clicked and he was, up there playing chess with Kabreem, and he was totally fine. And he was doing magic tricks with the blindfold on. It was incredible. It was really incredible to witness.
Yes, I want to pause and say just shout out to Alec for creating that beautiful field of coherence with the audience. You prompted the audience to say, hey, for these abilities to really demonstrate the full beauty that is possible, I ask that you guys be very mindful of the quality of your energy that you bring into this space. And then we guided the children with a little short breathing and a little bit of exercise to get them into their optimal state. And then we did the demonstration. So it was a beautiful collaborative effort, especially on your part, Alec, to make sure the audience created a coherent field for the children. Thank you for that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think it's incredibly important. Obviously, it's vital for these abilities to really shine. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to turn it over to the parents and hear from them. And I want to hear from John Chavez regarding some of the other work that he's doing, some of the other research that he's doing. So if I could hear just from the perspective, I'll start with Paul and Jeannie. If you could just share your perspective of your daughter going through Dr. Edith's program.
Okay. Well, my husband Paul had heard about Dr. Edith through Dr. Amanda Vollmer, who was a guest at Confluence. And he showed me a few of the videos, and I was like, wow, someone is actually facilitating this, something I had already believed in since my childhood, but never knew there was someone out there who could actually facilitate this for my daughter and help develop this. So we were all in, and she's 12. So we had heard in advance that there's a possibility that she may take some time to activate. It might be a little bit more difficult with her being 12 years old. So we just went with the flow. We didn't give her the mask in advance. We didn't tell any outside family members because we do have some people around us that might be closed-minded towards what we were doing. And we just wanted to keep it very positive. First class comes in, oldest group, all of them are the oldest out of everyone. Majority of children, 5, 6, 9 years old, and they all activate in the first session. And like, we're crying, right? Everyone remembers the first moment that you actually see the activation and you're like, wow, this is really happening. So fast forward through the
Pause for a second, please. This group that you guys were in, a special group of 11 to 13-year-old children, because we wanted to group them together to make sure they could go at the pace that's appropriate for that.
Yes. And I think we were all surprised, or we were told after, we were all surprised that they were all activated. And there were some children who were younger and may have had other influences that they weren't activating as quickly as our group. So it was pretty incredible to witness. And so after the first session, my husband and Lila, they say, let's do some more. That was awesome. So they spend a couple hours doing it. And she says to him, I think I'm seeing through my nose, even though her window is here, it's on her left. And you can tell when she's trying with the blindfold on, she's leaning this way, not like this through her nose, how if it was open, but she had mentioned she thought she was seeing through here. And just naturally, we didn't think anything of it. And we just slapped some black duct tape right here. And we tried on the blindfold after that, and it was solid. You couldn't see anything. A little bit of light naturally, because for those who don't know, there is foam all the way around. So there is light that comes in, and that's all, but you can't see through it. But we put on the black duct tape and she progressed. There was no issue whatsoever. And we continued on with the classes, and, within our own group, there is a little chat group where all the families can talk with each other about all of the successes and excitement or anything you want to pick each other's brains about. And through the group, there's some families who had some concerns about their children peaking because their children were younger. They can't articulate whether they have a hole or not, right? But I had to check, I chimed in saying my daughter's 12 and she can perfectly tell me if she can see or not. And we blocked it off. And furthermore, it doesn't matter anymore. Like what I mean is the blindfold, hyper focusing on the blindfold is meaningless in the end when you see them really awaken to the sense. So after class, my daughter and her 3 younger siblings having fun, they're putting the cups behind her head and they're hiding pom-poms under the cups. And they think it's hilarious. They're setting it up behind her. And she has to guess which cup has a pom-pom and what color is it. And they're doing this behind her. Yes, she has the blindfold on, but everything is happening behind her, not from the front coming around, all behind her. And she's guessing it at 100% accuracy. And they're loving it. And it's great. And see, at that point, the point of the blindfold is moot. You don't have to be so concerned about it because she's activated. And what we're really focusing on is the end goal, which is awakening that sense. And that is the beauty of this. And the analogy I've given to parents has been just like learning how to ride a bike. You have training wheels on the bike. We don't hyper focus on the training wheels. It's all about riding the bike. Look at me, I can ride the bike, no training wheels, that's great. We don't look back at the training wheels and say, well, what kind did you have? How did you, how big were they? How were they balanced? None of that matters because the end goal is riding the bike. And for me right now, the Mindfold, how it looks, how it fits, nothing. It's absolutely irrelevant because I can see the end goal in my daughter now. And that is what I'm focusing on developing. And that at least has been my experience through it all. And maybe my husband has more.
After the first session, I think I'd watched Alex had posted a video a week or two before of him showing himself behind the kitchen counter or something, just holding up fingers or whatever to his son and him, rattling him off. And I was just so excited after the first class. I didn't want it to stop. So we just kept going. And I got in front of the kitchen. I'm standing probably 15, 20 feet in front of my daughter. She's wearing the Mindfold. And I was literally pulling out like every kitchen utensil that was in the kitchen, in the drawer by the stove. And I'm holding up one after another. And she's nailing them to the point where she was literally nailing them before I even got them held up high for her to be able to witness them. So I never had any doubts. And if there was any doubts, like I slapped the blindfold on myself later that night. And I'm like, even if there's a peephole or something coming through here, there's no way that my daughter just did that.
Yeah.
Through this little teeny tiny fraction of a light, if that's even what it is. Because I put the blindfold on tight enough and I'm not even totally sold on the fact, like I had it on tight. I didn't let any lights leak through. I'm like, these little pinholes that are coming through, are they really light or are these something different that I'm just experiencing that I only know to be light, but maybe that's not really what it is?
I think those are really important points. And I wanted to comment on that just to reiterate what you're saying with respect to the foam. So again, Dr. Edith and Bodan stressed that in the beginning, they want the masks to be a little bit more loose so light does filter through. But what we're talking about here is that, let me preface this by saying, any mask that you wear that is just a mask like this, a typical sleeping mask or something like that, if you wear it a certain way, of course, you're going to be able to peek. And with that being said, when we're talking about light filtering through, the mask is foam. You can't make out objects through that foam, if you get what I mean. There's tiny, almost microscopic perforated holes inside this foam, of which light is, of course, filtering through the crevices of that foam. But you're not making out objects. And of course, again, it's not sufficient to explain what I've witnessed with my own direct experience with my son and also other children, speaking to Matthias, speaking to what I saw with Kabreem and what I've seen with so many other kids at this point, who are able to do far beyond what could be considered quote unquote peeking just below the nose or something like this. So I completely agree with you. It's like, that is not even a conversation at this point. It's irrelevant because of what I've seen elsewhere and what I know it eventually leads to. That's the most important thing.
Alec, please pause for a second. This conversation is irrelevant for those of us that have moved past that stage, but it is highly relevant for some of our friends that are still stuck with this inquiry. Like, is it really, so I have compassion for all the levels of this inquiry that it is very fruitful for us to address this skepticism because there are friends in the community that, because they're still at that first stage of the beginning of activation. With the swimming analogy, they're still in the blowing bubbles floating on the backstage. And so we do need to give them the inspiration that if you trust the process, let it keep unfolding, eventually you can swim the butterfly stroke 100-meter dash. So it is on us as a community to show all the layers and levels of progression and explain in a way that keeps people inspired to keep going until ultimately they all have their own direct experience of this. And then there's no more doubt.
That's exactly why I said that at the very beginning. Like, I totally understand where if you haven't had the direct experience with this, where you might, teeter on the edge of like, this has got to be completely made up. And I totally get that, which is why it's like the necessity to encourage, hey, just stay the course, remain open-minded and skeptical. And I promise you will be surprised at what your kid, and not only what your kid can do, but what you might be able to do if you start working on these abilities yourself.
I think that's the key point when you said what you might be able to do, because I think as parents, just like what Anna experienced there at Confluence, who wants to put their children in front of someone who's highly skeptical when you know that this is what might happen? Like, after seeing this beautiful experience that my daughter had, like, it's almost like something changed inside of me, or it reaffirmed something about the way that I believe the capabilities that we have, that I would hate for that to be squashed by putting my child in a guinea pig situation for someone who's so highly skeptical that energy is going to be potentially passed on. And we're so new to this. Anna's been doing this or with her children for many, many years. So I don't know, like, at what level is there a chance that maybe you would disable this in your child after it's already been activated? Because to me, that would be horrendous. It would be beyond speakable as if that were to happen. And I would feel guilty, obviously, as a parent if I allowed that to happen to my child, which is why I do feel like when Dahlia talks about doing this as adults, as much as that's probably much more challenging. Like, I can speak from my own experience, having tried it myself, like seeing my daughter activate in like 3 minutes, it was to the point where she's almost like, Daddy, what's the big deal about this?
Yeah.
So it's almost like it's kind of hard to even like get her to practice, because it's like, like, Daddy, you're asking me to practice like speaking, or you're asking me to practice something that's so trivial to me.
Yeah.
But
and
like,
it's tiring for them. So
I really think for the super skeptics, if we don't do this as adults ourselves, then I don't know how do we really convey it to them without nobody, let's be honest, like, nobody really wants to put their child on the world spectacle and removing the innocence that we all are trying to preserve in our children up to a certain point to convince some naysayers. So I realize it's a real dichotomy as to how we go about doing this correctly without sacrificing our children in the process.
Absolutely. And the fact is that, for example, Matthias loves sharing that with people. Since he started doing it, he's like, Mom, can I show that to this person? Can I show that to the other person? And I was telling him, no, because most of the people still are not ready for this. These are your superpowers. So you need to kind of navigate that, because it has happened quite often that almost everybody we've showed it, they have said, oh, you are cheating. You're a good magician, they tell him. You're a very good magician. You do magic tricks. You do it pretty well. So I stop exposing them to that. In fact, I haven't done. But in Confluence was very nice, because he was playing pool in front of in the cabin we were sleeping. He was playing pool because he wanted. He was playing blindfolded. And this is when someone told him, you cannot do that. And then he collapsed. And this has happened several times. I mean, in these years that my kids have been doing that, there's been times in which they don't practice because they get very tired. It's true that they use a lot of energy to do this. And so they get tired and say, no, Mom, I don't want to do that. And then I told them, use it or lose it. So let's go. But they've lost that a few times. And they start saying, Mom, I've been always cheating. And say, who has told you that? And then they come back and they open again and they do it. But yeah, we need to be very careful. And I don't want to expose them to, like, if they were a circus clown.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Dr. Anna, Alec, thank you so much for setting us up, our families up in the same house in Confluence. So having our children just naturally be in community with other children that experience life with these expansive sets of possibilities, and it just be a normal part of our experience of what it is to be a human. It is so beautiful and really speaks to the fact that we really need the community support, other families in our community that are nurturing these abilities, and just let it be a natural, normal part of life.
Amen. I'd like to hear from Nick too, on his perspective as a parent. I know he shared a little bit earlier, but I'd like to hear a little bit more, Nick, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, my experience as a parent was similar. I've always been interested in kind of intuitive arts. I had some training when I was fortunate when I was quite young. So I had a little bit of exposure, nothing like this though. And so my middle daughter in particular was showing a lot of aptitude toward, I would say, just intuition in general. We would play these games of, I would hide a rock around the house and she would try to feel the energy to find where it was, and really successful. So when I saw this come through, and I'd, chatted with Dr. Edith previously. And so when I saw it, I just jumped at the chance. And she has definitely been able to demonstrate it. I mean, it's been remarkable. Like, since I would say maybe the first session. And one of the things that we like to do is just, like I've already mentioned, is go outside into the hallway. But another fun game is just put it on your phone. So do a random color generator on your phone, but then close the phone. And then she can still see the color even through the phone. So my screen is completely off. So there's just no skepticism whatsoever from my end. But to Dr. Edith's point, I do understand how it sounds crazy. If you grew up in a conventional world, it does sound crazy what's possible. And so some of the things we like to play with even now is thinking about the future. So what can she identify the color of a random card that I'm going to pull in a second or in 2 seconds without even seeing it? Or, what's going to happen in the next 5 minutes? Something like that, like predictive power is interesting to us as well.
So I'd love to summarize what you just said there, Dr. Nick, about these layers and levels of nuances that we're talking about. I'm feeling the compassion in my heart for the skeptics, as well as those of us that have already had the direct experience, the full range of our audience, and that what we're talking about is many different abilities, and ultimately they all kind of integrate together. So there is intuitive feeling, intuitive sensing, intuitive smelling, intuitive tasting, intuitive hearing, intuitive knowing, and intuitive seeing. That we can call that one sense is Mindsight, but blindfolded perception training. The blindfold is kind of a tool to help us then choose consciously to develop all of these multisensory abilities to exercise all of this. And then as they start to integrate, it becomes precognition and remote viewing, and then ultimately leads us to, and this is from Dahlia's daughter, who's been visiting me pretty regularly in my dreams and meditations to teach me about telepathy. Ultimately, this is stepping stones towards mankind awakening our full telepathy abilities. And while I was in darkroom, Dahlia's daughter came to teach me some lessons about telepathy, and that even in telepathy, as we train for it, there is like telesentience, telecognizance, teleolfactance, telegustance, audience hearing, like all of these subsets of telepathy that we can exercise and strengthen until it just all becomes a natural part of life. Just like the way that our 5 physical senses, we don't need to think too much about it anymore. It's just part of life, and you just go and live life, But until then, all of these are dormant muscles that we're just waking up.
Yeah, I love that. And I do, that's what I aim for with training is you get it to the point where it's so easy for you that you never have to tap into it. You don't have to meditate. It's just a sense you can immediately use. And going back what the parents were saying about my household's a little different because I was one that opened first, not with the telepathy. That's my daughter. But with the blindfold vision and stuff, I was the one that opened first. And so my kids, they're all young and they just see their mom doing it. And so immediately they said, "Mom, how come you can see everything?" And I'm like, "Well, you can too." And just me saying that, they put it on instantly. They could because they saw that I could do it. And it was just not even something they're even questioning, second guessing. They just can do it. And so they see mommy doing it. And so they'll often put on blindfold and they'll be playing games together with the blindfolds on. What's really nice is my older daughter, she's 15, Lidu, she's the one with the telepathy and everything, and they see what she can do. And so it's like, I'm actually kind of learning from Lidu too, but they are saying, "Oh, if Lidu can do it," they'll say, "How come Lidu can do it?" And as soon as they say that, I say, "Well, you can do it too." And then they'll start having these experiences. And so I've actually been playing with telepathy games with them and stuff. And they're surprising me with their telepathy abilities. And so it's just amazing. Like once we just kind of start progressing and knowing, the first step is just knowing it can be done and seeing it done. And then we can just start progressing. And once it's just a common thing, it's going to be so incredible, like how much we can progress as a human species.
Amen. And that's a great segue to call on my friend John Chavez to share some of his research with DMT Quest.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Just a little background, I guess, for the people that don't know me. So I was like a hardcore skeptic Didn't believe in any of this stuff. Wasn't interested. Then I had like a mystical experience in 2013 from a healing crisis that kind of threw me in hardcore psi ability, like firsthand being able to do stuff for like 12 weeks. And that changed my perspective like drastically. So, when I talk about any of the things I'm talking about, it's from that perspective of like being completely closed off to it, wasn't even interested, would clown on it even if I heard about it, to like, okay, all this stuff is real. What are the mechanisms behind it? So that's why I started DMT Quest, partly to facilitate research regarding, all these sort of supernormal abilities and understanding altered states and the neurochemistry of altered states, electrophysiology of altered states, but also in how to communicate these things, right? Because that's really one of the most difficult things regarding psi or supernormal human potential, and communicating it with things like skeptics and academics, scientists, things like that. So that's kind of like a big, I guess, initiative behind DMT Quest, is finding a nexus where you could have two sides and create communication lines between both sides to progress humanity, because that's really what's needed. When it comes to the blindfold perception, I got really interested in it because I saw that it was scalable. Dr. Edith started her course, and I think she's up to training 100 kids. And
100. Wow, we'll be 200 by next month. Yeah.
And there's like dozens of other platforms across the world that have been training probably like thousands of kids at this point. So it's everywhere. So it's a psi ability that is trainable and it's scalable. And that's where you can have the most impact, from my perspective, when it comes to opening up the conversation at a greater level. Having said that, I think that it's important to understand, like, what are the arguments from the skeptics in this field. I've been in contact with various skeptics of different levels. One of them was the Center for Inquiry. They're the group that's offering $500,000 for proof of psi or any of these abilities. And they seem to be a little bit too hardcore in terms of the requirements. Like a shield wouldn't even be, I guess, suffice. They would need like a hood over somebody's head and cinched up tight. And obviously that's not realistic for most people, especially to expose their kids to something like that. And then I was at the Side Games in August or whenever, earlier this year. And I don't know if any of you guys have seen a mentalist do, their version of Mindsight, but it was very much, very clean display that opened my eyes to the fact that a mentalist could essentially fake Mindsight and make it look as clean as what Dahlia does, and like, I didn't even think that was possible, and seeing that firsthand kind of shifted my perspective a bit as to, okay, like what do the skeptics need to accept that this is a legitimate thing? Because basically you could have mentalists go out there, showcase their ability to do quote unquote Mindsight, and then they could really throw a wrench in this whole thing for the kids that are displaying it in the same way. And then I've been in discussion recently with the group called the Cusack Group. They're part of a Tom Campbell's group they've launched a mindsight.study. That's their website, where they're collating basically all the Mindsight platforms across the world. But what they're requiring is that, so you have the blindfold, and then they're requiring like a shield, like with Velcro, to go on the blindfold, to be like, obviously it blocks like anything regarding under the nose and even on the side. And it seems like a reasonable thing to ask for in terms of taking it to the lab and studying it in like a very comprehensive, hardcore way, spending, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars getting this studied at multiple universities. But the interesting thing, at least in the field research, playing with Dr. Edith's son, Kabreem, and just asking other people that have like tried the shield in comparison to just the mask, is that it seems to be a slightly different ability. For whatever reason, Mindsight with the mask, it seems to be like Windows based, and you're peering, you can actually see it, well, whatever the target is, similar to how you would with your eyes. And then with the shield on, it seems as though it becomes more of like an intuition, not so much like as a visual stimulation, or a hybrid of the two. It's very strange.
What you're saying there, John, just to clarify, you're saying is that if you block off any amount or a high amount of light to filter in, then you are then leaning into a completely different type of perception, type of intuitive ability than Mindsight.
That's what it looks like. That's what it seems like. I think Dahlia can talk about it from the adult's perspective as to what's the difference for her, because I know she's practiced with that. But these are the nuances that need to be fleshed out. But I want to go back to the skeptic thing, because I think it's important to create a group that can do both Mindsight with the blindfold and then Mindsight with the shield or a curtain. And the reason why I say that is because you're essentially protecting the entire community, right? Like you're giving the evidence that the skeptics need to overcome their doubts, but in a concentrated group. And then they could point to the fact that the blindfold is a legitimate barrier, but it's just different, right? Then you have the shield on and it's just different. And these people can go into the details of how it is different, and they can give credence to the actual blindfold. And in essence, it would be protecting the kids, and that would be protecting the parents and the families and all that. So that's really what I guess my focus is right now. I'm pinpointing on, well, what's the pain points? What's holding this whole thing back? Can we create a group that can do this in order to go ahead and protect the greater community, and then we can move forward faster?
That was precisely the insight that I had during Darkroom. I meditated deeply on, like, show me how can we be of the highest service to this awakening and expansion of possibilities that mankind is so hungry for right now. What is it? How can I be of service? And it was shown to me that part of it is to invite our now soon to be almost 200 kids that have gone through our program to see if some of the kids want to explore, experiment, innovate, and play with some different setups that include multiple different setups, and also the shield in front, and show us and teach us what are the subtle nuances of differences that they experience with the various different setups, to actually teach mankind these subtle milestones and abilities that kind of develop. And what is the relationship? What is the difference between the shield setup versus just covering the eyes, not using the eyes, but having the face exposed? Are there subtle nuances that we can learn and unpack a little bit more, which would contribute to this whole field in a really beautiful way?
Yeah, absolutely.
Luminous Kids Innovators Club, and invite the kids that want to explore in these ways. And that's not for every kid, right? Some of the kids will be really into it. And some of them, the reason they signed up for this is so that, so that they can just play Easter egg hunt, or do piñatas at birthday parties and win all the candy or something. Like, everyone is aligned to this work differently. And the ones that see themselves as wanting to be human pioneers to move this body of work forward, I would love for those children and those families to come and continue exploring with us.
With me, I did work with the CUSAC group, and even on the first couple of days, I was able to see the shapes through there. I started with the CUSAC group, and this is the extended mass is a newer thing. And so it's another thing we need to just progress. And so we're at the very baby stages. So to just say it's different, I wouldn't say it's different. I just think this is the baby stage. We need to learn how to, be able to see with light through that as well. And I know that it's possible because I've done it. I've done it with the CUSAC group, and just the first couple of days of it being introduced. At first, I did the same thing I did when I first opened. I used a flashlight and I was able to see colors. I could still see colors very easily with that thing. I have a bigger one that covers my entire head, and I can easily see colors with that. But with that first week, though, we tried it with shapes because they said colors doesn't impress them, and I said, fine, let's do shapes. And so I put the light on there, and the shapes did come through for me, and even David Cusack, David, he was just like, wow, this is really impressive. And I actually have a video of me doing it. He said, this is really impressive. And so they got really excited. And like, the visual, doing it with light is actually possible. But I would never say someone that is, barely got their windows open and they're excited with the mask should expect to do it with the extended mask immediately. I would expect them to do it the same way, where they build up with the intuitive side and do it through intuition at first, and then allow the light to come in. But my whole point is that we're at the baby stages, and it's hard to just research it right now when it's so new. Like, this is brand new. That extended mass is just from this year, from what I know, and it's very new to me still. So we're just trying to figure it out. At the same time, I love the idea of having the group that actually specialize in getting much better for skeptics, specifically for them, because then we can have groups that are specifically for just progressing. Then we have the group for skeptics who are knowing what they're getting into and they're prepared for that kind of energy. I do love that idea. But yeah, I'm excited for it. When they introduced that mask to me, I was so excited. I was like, I would love to do this, you know? And so yeah, I like the mask. I think it's exciting and it is very much gonna, you know, I still did. I've actually demonstrated with that mask, and I still get skepticism. You know, I still get people saying, "Well, there's got to be something going on here," and so they'll try to come up. I memorized them or something. You know, I always get something like that, but it doesn't bother me at all. Like to me, the most important thing is getting this out there, and that's what we're doing.
Dahlia,
Yes,
can you
I
share
can-
real quick, or Dr. Edith, just for context for those who are unaware of the flashlight, like what the purpose of that is? Because I could see where that might have gone over someone's head.
So Dahlia's use of the flashlight is a little bit different from the way that we use it in the Luminous Kids program. I'm hesitant to say it because it has been used, the way that we use it in the Luminous Kids blindfold training program has been done very carefully and cautiously. So I'm just going to skip saying that what we do with that because it's for liability. If you don't use it correctly, it could be slightly injurious. So I want to make sure people only do the flashlight arm method within the safe container of them being live coached by our trained facilitators. But what Dahlia was saying is that and I can speak to having trained with Dahlia, is that she uses the flashlight shining on the object to brighten the object so that the perception of that light sensing can be amplified. Similar to the fact that we find with our kids program, if the kids aren't perceiving very well, we say, just do all of your practice outside in super bright sunlight and your, biophoton interactions. We don't know the mechanism of action, but for some reason, when you're in bright natural sunlight, the perception can get enhanced pretty quickly. I do want to speak to the fact that since all these conversations have been brewing, the lively debates in the Confluence community and, in my Luminous Kids parents community, I'm so grateful for the lively debates because it has deepened my own interest and inquiry into all these subtle nuances. So what we've been exploring with my child, and I'd love to explore with future groups of our children, is like, what is their experience of using just a regular mindfold versus taping over like this. So there's still a little bit of light that could potentially filter through, but there's no way that you can there's no hole. So if a child is playing catch or reading a book or sorting playing cards, like there's a little bit of light, but you can't read through this versus obviously, Paul and Jeannie, you guys did this setup with your child, right? Like just a completely thick black duct tape. And with my child, we actually did this setup. So it covers part of the face, you see? And then finally, we shifted to the big piece of paper shielding in front. And what we find is that up until this point, so far, my child is saying that this made his windows of perception smaller, but it was still very much the same mindsight ability. He was able to see, he was able to read, he's able to sort playing cards and all the same visual experiences. Up until this, he still had it. When we put this shield, though, then he kicked into intuitive sensing. And he got 6 in a row, then later 8 in a row colors correctly. Then we shifted into shapes and big shapes. He had hesitation, but he says, it feels like a triangle. It feels like a circle. It feels like a square. And then I gave him some number cards. And he says, this one feels like a circle, but a distorted circle. And he didn't know that it was a number. It was a 0. And then I gave him a 2. And he was like, oh, this one's a 2. And he says he has to feel it. Then he has to train his mind to then see it. but it was like a morphed kind of visual that so it speaks to what Dahlia is talking about. Is retraining the feeling sense and then remapping it into visual experience in his brain, I suppose. So this is so super new that we need to just experiment and explore and play and see what we discover. And then ultimately we will get to that point where it is repeatable and demonstratable. But I want to encourage all of us to just recognize that it comes with the territory as a human pioneer. There's a lot of unknown questions and interesting inquiry that we are just entering into, and please be patient. There are those that are like, why aren't the answers already there? Shouldn't it already be there? You should already know all of this. And, Dahlia and I and Dr. Anna, we are moms raising children and doing our very best to inspire these beautiful possibilities. And we're just single human beings doing our best. We need many teams of people to be stepping into this inquiry, and we can all take on our little piece of the puzzle and be of service to this greater whole that is expanding together as all of mankind opens to these possibilities.
Yeah, and Dr. Edith, what you were describing about Kareem, it reminds me when we were working together and playing together with the blindfold, and how even without you seeing it in a visual way, you were still knowing it in your. It was like 100% of the time with you. You would always like, well, I know it's a square, or I see it in my mind's eye, but you weren't seeing it yet. But then you didn't, you did, but at first you were always seeing it there, and it sounds like that's what Kareem is going through with whenever you add another piece of progression, make it a little bit harder. And then at first he's just seeing it with the mind's eye or knowing, and with one of his other senses, but he's still getting it. Because I always like to say that the subconscious knows the answer already, and it'll tell you in whatever way. And we're practicing all these other senses so much that it'll give it to you in the sense that it can give it to you the quickest with. And then we develop the visual again. So it's just about getting the visual to the next level and the next stage.
Can I ask you guys a question? Like for everybody on the panel, is everybody doing this with their eyes closed? Are the kids doing this with their eyes closed, or is everybody doing it with eyes open under the mask?
So John, I always when we're talking visual, I always encourage them to do eyes open first, because that is how we're born thinking, and we're just kind of have the idea that eyes opens means to see, eyes closed means to not see. And we're kind of programmed that way already. So to progress, it's just easiest if they open their eyes. And then I will, once that's too easy for them, then I actually start teaching eyes closed. So there's some people who are so skeptical, they don't want to open their eyes at all. So with them, I do start eyes closed. I'm like, you can start eyes closed. You don't need to have eyes open. It just makes it much faster. But there are some people where I said, you know what, like at this last seminar I was at, there was a couple of adults that just really didn't want to do it that way. I said, it's okay. You know what? We'll just do eyes closed with you. And yeah, they can progress too. It takes a little bit of a mental hump to get over the idea. So we have to create these anchors. That means when my eyes are closed, I want to see, and then they have to get used to that anchor, but they can do it too. So it is definitely a thing. It's a progression thing.
So I have two. Dr. Anna, please go first, and then I'll answer this.
The kids I've trained, all of them see with the eyes open. And my kids, once I try to tell them, okay, let's do that with those eyes closed, and they ask me, but mom, then when I want to go to bed and I want to sleep, I'm going to continue seeing, and I don't want that. I want to be sure that when I rest, I can rest, and not that they don't want to develop that with their eyes closed, because then what are they going to do when they want to sleep? That was their answer.
I had this experience with my little girl, my 5-year-old, after she got her Mindsight activated, and I trained her with eyes open for a few nights there. She was like, Mama, I see everything with my eyes closed. I can't go to sleep. I'm like, honey, you've been laying there for so long. Why aren't you asleep? She's like, I'm seeing the whole room. So we had to do some breathing. It's like, let's just train yourself. When your eyes are closed, you don't see. So that is a byproduct that we'll have to contend with once we activate our Mindsight with eyes closed. Then we need to train ourselves like, okay, now please turn it off so I don't see. But it's a similar thing with the kids when I say, hey, it's Christmas or birthday, and I say, can you use your blindfold vision and see what's inside the present? And they say, no, we don't want to do that. It would ruin the noise. We're turning it off so we can be surprised when we open the presents, So there's all these like fun, interesting nuances to it. But to answer the eyes open versus closed question, the point is that human beings are amazing. We can train ourselves either way. I have found, interestingly, with my practice, that when my eyes are half open, half closed, is when I get the best results. Very interesting. So I don't know if there is some natural biofeedback with your physiology where eyes open. When I meditate, I've also trained myself to meditate eyes open or eyes closed. But for the most part, when eyes are open, I'm more focused on kind of like the external environment. With eyes completely closed, it's natural to go inward. And when I'm half open, half closed, that seems to be when I get my mindsight abilities most clear and bright. And so after having trained with Dahlia, I've had a lot of new experiences with my mindsight also that also just helped me deepen my understanding, build my confidence. This window has occasionally been so giant and huge that there's no, this side's still a small circle, but this side sometimes is 2 circles, sometimes it's a giant upside down U. And when it's that big, I don't have doubts that I'm actually perceiving using my mindsight. I'm not peeking through a tiny crack when it's a giant window like this.
It's funny. I have a couple of students that they just naturally think when I do intuitive things, I close my eyes. And so they'll have their blindfold on and I'll instruct, hey, open your eyes. But they will forget to open. It just naturally. And so they'll just get so good with their eyes closed that they can't do it with their eyes open. And so those ones have to have their eyes closed. But yeah, so I do it the opposite, Edith, and where I say, okay, we're going to create an anchor. So when your eyes are closed and you want to see, you're going to go and they'll create their own, but something like this, so that when they go to sleep and they're not doing that, it can just turn off. So there's like a couple of ways to go around that.
Do you think that the people that do it naturally are more comfortable with the eyes closed can perceive with the shield easier than the people that do the mindsight with the eyes open?
I haven't tried the sheet on a lot of the people I've been working with. I've just a couple, but that's a really good thing. I would love to try. I would love to.
Seem to prefer their eyes closed and naturally will just close your eyes whether you kind of ask her to or not. And it would be interesting. I've only seen the shield element of it recently. It'd be interesting to try, but I have done quite a bit of like holding a paper up in front, kind of like what Alec was saying. If you hold a paper up in front and put something behind her, especially early days when it was kind of like, what's going on here? I never thought she was cheating. I was just sort of had to get over some of my own innate skepticism, not being a skeptical person at all, but she does close her eyes pretty frequently.
I also would love to see how it works with a blind person. And now I'm going to totally try that soon. I'm going to totally try it.
Me too. I'm going to try with the kids too. What I have observed is that at the beginning, the kids I've trained, when they start, they have to open the mouth. Interestingly enough, it's not so much about the eyes, but they open a lot the mouth, which is very interesting to me. They do like faces, really weird faces, and then they open, and then it's done. Then they don't need it so much. But the beginning is opening the mouth. I don't know if it's because of the muscles or what, but it's the mouth what they need to open.
I noticed that too. And I also noticed, this is so weird, but if you put the flashlight in the mouth, it helps you open faster too. It's just the weirdest thing. But I've noticed that where people they go like that with their mouth to open faster.
Yeah, there's a lot of my study of Chinese medicine and acupoints and fascia physiology. Some of them in our method, that is a lot of it is borrows from a method called infovision, which nobody is actually teaching anymore. Sadly, it was developed by Mark Komisarov and Mihaela Isradi in Eastern Europe. And Mihaela has sadly passed on, and Mark is apparently no longer doing this work, but their method was featured in that Superhuman documentary that many people have watched. So some of the flashlight use and this idea that that some of these light sensors on the face, we can kind of awaken the visual sensing, like on your cheeks, on your temple, behind your head, as if there's eyeballs on your face. That thinking comes from the infovision method. And so this idea that like sometimes children are like wiggling their face to kind of activate this. And also some of these acupoints in Chinese medicine, we know that the major acupoints are places that have high electrical activity, more so than other places in the body. And so with fascia, we understand that there's a lot of fourth phase water that's transmitting information. So this might be some interaction between light and fourth phase water, and imprinting the water with visual information per Veda Austin's work. And somehow you are able to translate the visual imprinting of pictographic information and light information onto the fourth phase water. That informed water gets translated maybe by your brain into something that you can process as a visual picture in your mind. Unknown, the mechanism of action. Back to what Dr. Anna says, like, just because we don't understand it, doesn't mean it's not true. And it's still a fun inquiry. Like, how does it work? It's really interesting.
I totally agree. And I wanted to add to that with the whole making the faces and stuff. There is some skepticism, like, why are they making faces? Are they moving the mask? And why are they moving their head and stuff? I wanted to also point out that blind people do the same thing. The blind people will have windows in certain areas, and they're not wearing a mask. And they still have to go like this. And when their windows are opening, they're still straining. It looks exactly the same as a sighted person with a mask on. And so there is something to it where our windows, what were their names? Nikolai Marina, they actually explain it in one way. They say that, with windows, or they don't use the term windows, but basically they say whatever you're using to see, you have to move your head, because it's not like your eyes, where your eyes can move up and down, left to right. Wherever these areas are where you can see, you have to actually move your head in order to get it in that area, in that direction. And so with some blind people, they have it in the back of their head. And some have it like right here. A lot of them have it here around the eyes area, where it's similar to where we have it in our Mindsight. And it's always funny because I always tease them and I say, I could just teach you to read from the back of your head. It's just not, it's not useful in everyday life. So we're just going to stick to these windows and getting these ones stronger. But I totally could, and if I had them as a student long enough, I probably would, just for fun. But it's just interesting. We can learn so much from just the blind people and seeing the similarities between the blind and the sighted. It's very similar how we're opening.
Something that really helped me overcome my own skepticism is I put on the blindfold and I just lay on the grass and stare at the sun. And gradually these windows emerge. So the fact that it starts off like little cracks of light, and then as you warm up, breathe, meditate, the windows start emerging, and they can change over time. And as I shared earlier, it goes from like 2 little windows to 1 giant window, and then like back and forth. When it does that, that really actually helps me to overcome my own doubts. But what's interesting is that I've had a few experiences of just like playing sacred healing music, chilling out right here in my backyard, laying on the ground, staring at the sun. And then eventually it just like opens up where parts of the mask becomes translucent, but not all of it. So it's the same hard plastic. That's the beauty of this one. It's a uniform film of hard plastic. However, when I rotate my head left and right, some parts of it is translucent. Some part of it is black. Some part of it is translucent again, right? So does it make sense that I'm peeking through a hole when I'm seeing circular shapes of translucency, darkness, translucency, and so on, right? So these are the things where through direct experience, we have to have some patience and just allow it to reveal itself and emerge to us. And then we'll have our own direct experience. And then the doubts start fading away.
Yeah. And you know what I love? I love working with scientists, and I'm talking about training them. I'm training a few scientists. And what I love is they're not typical skeptics. They come in and they notice, they're using their logic to say, wait a minute, that's not how it should be. Like, these windows are different. They're changing. They've gotten bigger, and they're depending on my mood, they're going. So none of that makes any scientific sense. So they're using the way of thinking to actually explain why it is Mindsight. And so I actually love working with them for that reason. I've actually haven't had a scientist say anything to me that's like, oh, I don't believe this is happening. I believe I'm cheating. I had one person, she's like, well, I can see, if I cover this part of my mask, I don't see anymore. And I was like, go ahead and try that on me. And she does. She puts it, and I'm like, I could totally see everything still. And I was like, because my window, I didn't just stop there and just think, oh, I'm cheating and just quit. I let the window get so much bigger that I can see beyond that area. So that just helped her. I'm like, go ahead and try it. And so that's really good. Like what John was saying, to have the skeptic group where they're kind of bulletproof, where they're like, yep, one of the things with the Psy games, a couple of those people on stage, I know they could see, but because of they were afraid of the audience, and the mask was extremely tight. Like that mask was super tight. I knew I was fine because I trained with a tight mask. I knew the kind of thing I was getting into. I got on, I'm like, I'm nothing I haven't done before. But, and of course people still say like, oh, you were cheating in some way, but, it doesn't bother me because it's just so silly to me to even think that. And once people have actually tried it, they experience it. I had a couple of people who just came into the seminars that I've worked with, and they're just so like, this doesn't make sense. You've got to be peaking. And I said, you know what, just sit down and have an experience. Just because if I try to explain it to them, if I try to explain it in a logical way, their mind is never going to accept it. So I'm like, okay, just go ahead and have a seat, have an experience, put the blindfold on. I will purposely put activate them in a place that's impossible for them to see, like all the way in the back of them, 10 feet behind them. And they're thinking they're looking right here and peeking the whole time. I'm way behind them. Then I tell them, go ahead and take off the mask. I do. And they're like, wait a minute, how'd you do that? And so finally, because of the experience, they're like, okay, this doesn't make any sense. All right. This is my new reality. I've experienced something that doesn't make any sense. There's no explaining it. Okay, just keep showing me more. So there's some people that just need to have the experience.
Yeah, thank you. So Dahlia, this speaks to the fact that for our Luminous Kids program, the design of it, we have a lot of different options and choices. Is the design of it focus on a quick introduction within just 4 short weeks for the children to have the direct experience of these expansive possibilities? So we use the light in a certain way to quicken their access to it. Or is it to slow it down so that there's no chance of any doubt and skepticism, and go through it in a stage by stage way, the way that you do with adults, so that they don't have to deal with doubt and skepticism? Up until the last couple months, the method of just our really quick opening with the children has worked beautifully. But now, as this body work expands to more awareness with more different people asking about it, now we have a tricky situation. Are we going to redesign our whole program just to assuage the skeptics? That seems unfair to our children that just want to have the experience and get on with it because it's a natural ability and it's just fun, and they have 4 fun short weeks. They access this experience and then they move on. Is it fair for us to subject our families to be in that role of having to prove to the skeptics? So this is why the solution is to have a whole separate group of people that are interested in exploring the frontiers and dissecting the mechanisms of action a little bit more, because I do feel a bit of a mama bear protective energy. And I know John is feeling that way too. And that's his motivation. It's like, we want to protect the whole community so our children can stay in their playful, joyful innocence and not have to be all in this role of having to engage in this whole conversation about the skepticism, because that consciousness is actually not the consciousness where the most beautiful openings happen.
Yeah,
I
go
had a
ahead.
quick question for the group. I'm not sure exactly if it relates here, but I'm curious to know from those of you that are really exploring the mechanisms behind this. But do you think that perhaps this Mindsight, or whatever we're calling it, is activated in utero, and that the child, because they've had sensory deprivation, for those developing months in utero, that they're actually coming here already with this perception, and it's just kind of drifting away as we don't use it as we're developing, or maybe some people do, maybe more than others. Because we're kind of like what you did, Dr. Edith, like going to a retreat, like a blindfold retreat. You're kind of recreating, I guess, what you would have gone through while you're in utero. And I'm just wondering if maybe we're not really activating, we're just remembering what we already had, or what we came with.
I don't think it's just the Mindsight. I mean, I think it's everything, right? I mean, how many kids have talked about seeing like ghosts or dead people, right? How many kids have talked about having past life recollection? It's the whole gamut of abilities. I did a presentation for Edith a couple of years ago about how the brain activity of children is almost like a psychedelic experience, like an adult taking ayahuasca. That's what like a child is up until like 6, 7 years old. And then interestingly enough, like their ability to recall past lives falls off at the same exact time. Who knows if it's the schooling or who knows if it's just neurological development, but it's more than just the mindset. I mean, the kids have tons of abilities.
Yeah, and many of you guys are aware of the Kogis in Colombia. So they're teachers and seers and healers called mamos or mamas are chosen to be raised the first, say, 18 years in complete darkness, where they get access to just a tiny bit of light, just so that they can interact with the physical dimension of life when they come out of that dark training. Right. So like that's a whole different breed of human now that we're talking about. If you cultivate your expansive perceptive abilities for not just a workshop here, or in my case, my 9 days and 9 nights in complete darkness was so profoundly recalibrating. I've only done that a couple times, like imagine if years of this cultivation, you awaken whole different abilities as a human that lay mostly dormant for the rest of us. So it's a very interesting question.
Yeah, I was just going to add from a Buddhist philosophical perspective, the question wouldn't necessarily be in utero; it would be even pre-utero, right? So, like, where was the consciousness before it was in utero? And from that perspective, it's like there's a level of clairvoyance that most humans don't tap into because as we're born into physical body, we start to focus only on the physical, kind of like what Dr. Edith was saying, and then to the detriment of things that are not so obviously physical. And so one way to retrain that is like what Dr. Edith was saying, like a dark retreat in Dzogchen. The Dzogchen tradition within Tibet is very, it utilizes dark retreat very prominently, not necessarily for that. It's a little bit, the focus is a bit different because it's not simply to gain powers or healing or anything like that. It actually really is to gain a deeper insight into who we truly become and to gain a level of freedom with that.
I wasn't sure if it was appropriate to share here, but it seems like it's worthwhile to share. I shared a tiny bit with Alec on the phone and with John on the phone. So during Darkroom, we had some really profound and beautiful meditations. And on the, I believe, 7th day, Jasmuheen guided us with the most exquisitely beautiful meditation, where we all envisioned ourselves sitting in sacred circle and entering through this portal. And we had a guided journey into remembering our connection with Source and remembering the conscious choosing to individuate from Source. And so it was a multi-sensory experience where I experienced myself within the portal of having just freshly individuated from Source and what that felt like. I had the experience of what that memory felt like. And then I had the experience of simultaneous time of choosing many different incarnations, some human ones, some not even human ones, and many different dimensions of existence that I I experienced myself gaining the recall of what that feels like to have been all these different beings in these different expressions of my essence, one of which is this current embodiment as Edith. But while in that state, there was all this crap that literally got incinerated. There was this beautiful sacred white flame that just burnt off all the BS that we accumulate in our human experience of life, all these lies and limitations and programs. And I just experienced it burning off. Then the insight came that all these abilities we're talking about is a simple remembering of our natural state. And I know it can kind of sound trite, but I invite the audience to hear it with their heart and with their essence and not from a mental state. That these abilities we're talking about, we have already all experienced it. We're just inviting each other to remember. And so I had the conscious memory of having lived lifetimes and in civilizations where telepathy was normal, where these extrasensory abilities weren't called extrasensory abilities. They weren't called anything. They're just like normal, they're just life, right? And so it is kind of a big deal because humanity is going through this transition right now. And at the same time, it's not a big deal. It's just our natural state that we're returning to. So in that experience, coming out of that meditation, I felt myself fresh and new. And the next morning, when I woke up from resting after that meditation, my body felt completely new. I was able to do yoga stretches that I haven't been able to do before, an almost complete split, complete wheel pose, back bend, pigeon pose on the ground. I could put my leg over the head and kick it into a clock pose. All these things I haven't done since since I've had children, so 11 years. And so I'm experiencing all these other multisensory abilities opening up, and it's still very fresh. It's only been a few days since I came back from Thailand. So I'm curious and interested to see how this actually unfolds into these explorations that we are all diving into together here. But the insight that came was that it's actually not that big a deal. It's just a simple relaxing back into the state of remembering that these possibilities are innate in all of us. And the more that we chase and grasp and like have to explain it and, how does it work, to just remember that that's not the state of just dropping back into natural state of remembering, relaxing, and just let it open to you naturally without strain, without stress, just play. And it's already right here.
Yeah, regarding your question, John, about if it's what's the reason why suddenly the kids stop seeing the ghost or remembering their past lives or having these like more expanded experiences, is the thing is that we are always based on our Western science, and our Western science is absolutely limited. And we try to explain everything based on the brain waves or the rigidity of the skull and things like that. But if we came back to the ancestral knowledge, even not so far, even the spiritual science, we would be able to do a much better research than what we do, just taking into account an electricity and some rigidity of the bone. So I think I encourage people to look a little bit farther. I'm a scientist. I love science. I do biomedical research, but I know the limitations of the materialistic perspective about life. And we are talking about something that is not just matter. It's something that talks about the energy and the spirit and other parts of ourselves that we cannot deny, or you can if you want, but it would be a pity that you deny most of what you are. So I think it's very important to do research on that. I'm willing to do that. My kids are thrilled to do research too, but we need to expand the way we do this research to other places that is not just materialistic measuring, and that we can also go a little bit farther to understand what is a human being. Because unfortunately, I think that we have reduced human beings to just a body and nothing else, and that we think that this is all we are, and we use a body. We use it. We are not even a body. So we need to start looking a little bit farther. Who are we? And yes, remembering our dignity and our grandiosity as human beings. And there are other lines of thinking and other wisdom that is not just the regular science and can give us a lot of guidance on how to do that.
I would love to hear some final remarks from each and every person on the panel before we wrap up. Is that okay, Alec?
Sure.
Yeah, I would just go to say one of the limiting things is the idea that a psychic ability is here and this is where I am and I have to do all of this work to get to that psychic ability. When in reality, these are senses that we, like you said, we were born with, or even before we were born with. These are senses we already have. And so what I'm doing with people is it's not even so much that I'm teaching them to get to the ability. It's more like I'm giving them this process so that they can believe it more, that they have the ability. So I'm just gradually helping their belief system to know they already have it. And then I let them know that you get to a point where it's just instant, just like with your sight, just like with your sound, you're going to accept it as instant. It's not something you have to work hard for. You don't have to meditate for 3 hours. You don't have to do all of that. It can be instant. And I'm learning this stuff myself with my daughter. Like for one example, she can speak to entities and angels and stuff like that in real time. She can do it in real time. I always had the limited understanding that, I have to like meditate and I have to do all this to be able to access that. And she says, no, all you have to do is go into a state of ecstasy. And that's it. And so, so even those ideas, it's just this idea, this belief that it's hard to get to. It's an extreme ability. It's just our innate senses, and that's us. And like Paul and Dr. Edith said, like, yeah, it's a remembrance of that we have these abilities.
Yeah, I would just add on to that every indigenous or traditional culture has some kind of wisdom tradition that flows through it that has some level of these abilities and some level of training to be able to maintain these abilities from a young age or to reclaim them as you're older. So I think it's only sort of the modern West that poo-poos these abilities wholesale. And I think now it's interesting that with the advent of social media and people able to really see what's out there and really communicate with like-minded people, that there is going to be this surge of interest and also demonstration of these abilities just continuing through. So it's an interesting time to be alive, that's for sure.
Beautifully said. Paul and Jeannie, do you want to share?
Yeah, I wanted to speak to the parents that are considering embarking on this journey. Whether you're skeptical or not, there's a huge importance upon keeping it fun and positive and protecting that space for your child. So even if you yourself are having doubts at any moment, or you see your child struggling and you're upset about how it's going, or how you're feeling you're not a good facilitator, or the facilitator you have isn't Edith, or you have all kinds of things you're blaming, to take that energy out, to not have your child involved in that. It's just as important as the first email they give you. You're told to, to not tell a lot of people, to keep it positive. And I really want to emphasize the importance of that and keeping it fun. If you think back just in life, your favorite teachers you ever had, the ones that inspired you, how did they act? What kind of teacher were they? They were probably positive, fun. They made learning exciting. And as parental facilitators, we have to do the same for them. My daughter is activated. She can remote view, but you know what? If she hasn't eaten, if she has personal stress, if there's personal stress in the home, she won't perform at 100% accuracy. So those little things are just as important as their ability. So I just wanted to.
It's really true when Edith, I think maybe Bodan coined it when he said your secret sauce is having fun, because it was obvious when we were first learning in those first few classes. Even like a couple times I would even almost like tickle Lila to induce like laughter. And immediately, like there's just so much more that like the abilities seem like they're enhanced literally from simple laughter or fun. And I'm sure there's a real connection in the mechanism that you guys have discovered, that I'm sure other people have discovered, that I can't explain, but I have to imagine that there is something really there, that the positivity, the fun, it goes a long way in terms of how this is going to develop or not.
Yeah, I agree completely. I was having a conversation a few years ago at a symposium where there was a lot of scientists there, and I think Jill Peirce was there. That's Rupert Sheldrake's wife, and we were talking about, I guess, just the different eras, comparing this era to past eras. Like in the 1960s, that was the original psychedelic, I guess, boom. And now we're having like a renaissance of sorts in the psychedelic field. I know a lot of this conversation is regarding children learning this, but it'll come full circle. So she was saying that in the 60s, there was a psychedelic boom, and then following that in the 70s and 80s, there was like a deep interest in psi abilities. So it's interesting that like psychedelic seems to crack people's psyches sort of open to greater phenomena, but they don't necessarily experience it. But for whatever reason, even though they didn't experience telepathy or out of body or remote viewing, people come back from their journey and they become open to these things. And it seems as though what's interesting now is that we're having the psychedelic renaissance, a second one, and there's almost a possibility to integrate Mindsight into post psychedelic, I guess, experiences, right? So after somebody has undergone a transformative journey, they seem to be in an enhanced plastic state where maybe they're almost like to their childlike nature. The adults, right? They're remembering how to laugh. They're remembering how to be in their childlike state. And it seems like there might be an opportunity to integrate Mindsight post psychedelic journey. And I think that could like play a huge impact in terms of getting this whole thing recognized on a global scale as to the human potential. And I think Mindsight is going to be one like huge step towards that, into, you know, greater things like telepathy and much crazier things that I have a deep interest in. So really excited to see everything develop, and really excited to see you know, people pushing this forward, like everybody on this call. So just happy for it all.
Yeah, I'm very grateful for being here and hearing this conversation that for me is awesome that we can talk openly about this, because in a moment in which they want to convince us that we need to put a chip inside our brain to expand our capacities, being able to openly talk about, no, we are amazing. We have so many awesome capacities that we don't need to go to the synthetic path to get our all the possibilities that we have. So I encourage everybody to just go inside ourselves and find all these things that we can do, remember, or do trainings, and especially to John, to do research. That is very important, because if we can show that in a research-like thing, then we are debunking a lot of the knowledge that is so limited, that we are telling us that everything we cannot do. So thank you for giving us the possibility of just openly talk about this without having to invoke technology to be better. The human technology is the best thing we have, and human beings are great. The grandiosity, I always talk about the grandiosity of being human. And I think this is what we need to remember. So thank you, Alec.
Beautifully said. I'll just share briefly. When we did the blindfold vision demonstration during Confluence, it wasn't the act of 7 children displaying this ability, maybe because I'd seen it before, that was so shocking to me or so remarkable. What was the most remarkable thing to me was witnessing the grown men and women weeping at what they were seeing unfold in front of their eyes. That was the most remarkable thing, because it was both sadness and grief regarding thoughts of what could have been when I was a kid had I not been conditioned to believe that any of this was nonsense, or had been, you know, gone through the various traumas that I went through, et cetera, but also a recognition at the same time that, oh, that spark that's in these kids that hasn't been dimmed still exists inside of me. And by witnessing this happening, I'm remembering part of who I truly am. And that was the most beautiful thing to me by far. And I think being a part of these conversations, these experiences, I'm just so honored and so grateful to be facilitating this and to be doing this at all. It's just truly unbelievable. And I think we'll look back 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now and be like, do you remember when we were talking about that in such a limited capacity? Look at what we're doing now with our own innate technology. Dr. Anna, I cannot agree with you more. I say that all the time, that this is the greatest technology that has ever existed, that will ever exist. And we're just scratching the surface on what this and the soul that is inside of this can truly do when it is able to express fully through this physical vessel.
I'll share a few final remarks. It's just been so beautiful to be creating this field of energy together with you guys. Of course, we can go into a lot more words, but I hope that the audience has felt into the essence that's underneath all the words that have been shared here, that there's a heart, there's a soul, there's an essence that we're attuning to and aligning with here in this kind of conversation. And I love that Dr. Anna opened her initial remarks about the fact that this actually isn't even about the blindfold vision or the extraocular vision, that this is a quality of beingness, a state of being where many, many beautiful gifts unfold and show itself to us, and allowing our children to attune and align to truth in a really beautiful, coherent state of being. So we often say that our program is really a game-like form of meditation that invites our children to tap into their super coherent state, where as a natural byproduct, they might have blindfold vision, other blindfolded perception abilities, intuitive abilities open up, but also the creativity, the joy, the natural flow state, the way that they engage with their sports, their art, their music, their loving interactions with family members, and how it enters into coherence for the whole family and ripples into the family dynamic of much more peace and harmony and all of these other byproducts. So sometimes if we excessively just focus on this one thing, oh, are they peeking through the crack? Are they, prove it to me, right? That's in many ways just missing the points of the whole world of beauty and blessings and gifts that we're really talking about here. So I don't want us to lose sight of that much bigger picture of beauty that we're talking about when we also want to address the skepticism and the scientific inquiry to put it all into proper context. And to illustrate that, I hope it's okay. I'll show the Dr. David Hawkins map of consciousness that many audience members might be familiar with. Have you guys seen this map? So Dr. David Hawkins did a lot of research to show that as we evolve in our state of consciousness, that there's many different layers and levels of power and potency that we can tap into. I won't go into all the details, but he shares that at this scale, sub 200, he calls it force. And that's an energy of like pushiness and coerciveness and everything. It's like there's no flow state here, right? It's like you're trying so hard, you're grasping, you're seeking, and you act as if you're a victim of life. And so I trust that the kind of audience that is tuned into this conversation, that we get that from time to time. We all get into fear and anger and apathy and guilt and shame and anger and pride. But just know ourselves that those are not the states of being where the most beautiful blessings and expansive possibilities can show itself. Right. So we do our inner work. We step into the above 200 state of courage and reason and all these other levels where a lot more beautiful possibilities can show itself. And we become no longer a victim. We take self-responsibility. We are interested in our personal and spiritual growth and so on. And you tap into many orders of magnitude of power and potency in your life. Many more beautiful gifts start to unfold in your life. But just to humble ourselves that even this scientific inquiry at the level of reason is also limited. That you can only take the scientific inquiry so far and address a certain level of questions and inquiries. And at some certain level, when we tip into what he calls the 500 plus love, or as Paul and Anna and Dahlia, we've all articulated so beautifully, the state of joy and innocence and playfulness. The 540 plus state, as Dr. David Hawkins would label it, that's the state where our children are showing us they spontaneously open into these possibilities that are so magical and so delightful. So I suppose a challenge that I'd like to issue to our whole community is to consider at any given moment in your life, how often are we engaging in, debates on the internet from the level of pride, right? That will have a certain results for you. And when you're engaged in this level of pride, arguing about who's more right and so on, that is a very far state from the state where these expansive possibilities are, that they just blossom and open very naturally and easily. Right? To humble ourselves that, we all go up and down through these different states throughout the day. And this is the state of being, of joy and playfulness and innocence, that our children are really here to teach us and show us and help us to remember that these other states here are the natural state of being. And Dahlia and Lidu are showing us that the state where, Lidu naturally speaks with angels all throughout the day is the state of bliss, and or maybe even beyond that, right? So is an invitation. I hope that the audience will take this conversation as an invitation to open to all these expansive possibilities. There's layers and levels that are so much more beautiful that we can all open ourselves to. And Dr. David Hawkins has demonstrated that this isn't a linear scale, this is a logarithmic scale. So as Dr. Anna shared, the AI and the external technologies, they are moving and expanding in exponential ways, but so to us, our inner technologies are also awakening in exponential ways. So I have so much optimism and excitement for the future of all of us. And I'm so grateful we got to explore this conversation together.
Beautiful. Thank you all so much for being a part of this.
Thank you, Alec. Thank you. Thank you.